for Fehr. Tip goes in and scores! A sensational finish! Eric Fehr wins it for Washington.
Would you join me in welcoming Eric Fehr? Eric, thanks so much for being here, being willing to do this. You know, I've been trying to get you here for a few years, and I'm glad this worked out. We've been excited for this conversation for a long time. And as that video said, you know, you played in the NHL over 16 years, including Winnipeg Jets, Washington Capitals, Pittsburgh Penguins, with whom you won the Cup. Is it safe to say that retirement is now the official, or where are we at on that?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. It depends who you ask. I tried to retire last year. It didn't work very well. I ended up playing. So my wife won't let me officially retire till after Christmas when you know, I can't go play for any team. The trade deadline's done, and then we can have the party.
Saving the party till then, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I just love to start with saying is you were recently playing this last year in Russia, just a few months ago. You were actually there when the war broke out, and war broke out with Ukraine. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique experience. I didn't plan on playing last year, and I ended up signing in Russia to try to make the Canadian Olympic team. So, you know, I went over there, and everything was going well. It was a real unique experience for me. I left the family back at home because I wasn't going to be there very long, and you know, I was having a great time. It was a good experience, getting to experience the culture, the country. I didn't really have it on the bucket list to see all of Russia, but it was nice to cross that one off. My first road trip in Russia, I got to Kazan and hopped on a plane and flew 10 hours straight east, which a 10-hour flight to play a team in your league is pretty crazy. But you know, I got to see what felt like every city in Russia, and you know, it was a really unique experience for me. I really enjoyed it, obviously up until the point where the war started, and you know, there was a little bit of concern back home about getting us out of there, and you know, whether it was good or bad, however you want to look at it, we lost out in the first round, and I was able to come home. So, you know, that was great. And, you know, I was disappointed my family wasn't there, but at that point when we were trying to get out and everything got a little bit crazy, I was excited that they weren't there.
Yeah, maybe only time in your life you'd be okay with a first round loss in the playoffs. So,
exactly.
You now call Winnipeg home, but originally you're from Winkler, Manitoba, and nobody gets to the NHL without very supportive parents, and you've talked about that a lot. Tell us about just your parents and their influence on you growing up and playing hockey.
Well, my parents were great for myself and for my brothers growing up. Obviously, putting 3 kids in hockey is not easy. It's a financial burden, and you know, they worked hard to make sure we could always get our equipment and always play the games we needed to play, and you know, did everything we could to take care of us. And you know, looking back, it's kind of crazy that my dad never, ever pushed me. Like, he encouraged me, but he never pushed me. He never said, like, hey, you have to go do this. And it got to the point where I was getting pretty good, but, like, he never really said, like, hey, you should be working out or you should be doing this. He just kind of let me do my thing, which I can't say I'll be able to do that with my kids, but it's pretty impressive.
Well, and one thing I think that's almost, that he did so well, that's almost maybe a bit of an indictment to the current hockey culture, or not even hockey, sports cultures. One time you were offered a fully funded trip to Japan to play in an elite tournament, and he's like, yeah, you're not going.
Yeah, he had a rule that I could only play summer hockey every other year. So maybe this fell on that year, or he just didn't want me leaving for so long, but you know, that was a way for me to play baseball, do other things, play other sports. But I do remember one year he was gone at a tournament in Saskatoon for my brother's baseball tournament, and I was staying back home in Winkler, and my buddies called me and said, hey, we got a summer hockey tournament in Winnipeg, do you want to come? And we ended up breaking into my house on the farm, like took the hinges out of the doors, broke in, stole my hockey equipment, and went to Winnipeg to play in this tournament. So
are they discovering this today, or is this, yeah?
No, we talked about it a little bit after. I think he knows and he can remember it because I think the door's still broken.
And so you're growing up playing hockey, and you also, you met this woman that kind of swept you off your feet. Tell us about Rachel.
Yeah, so I met my wife actually in kindergarten, which is odd. We exchanged pictures in kindergarten like most kids do, And I wouldn't have remembered this, but in high school when we started dating, she actually pulled it out somewhere, and she still had the picture of me from kindergarten. But we grew up together. We spent a lot of time together in high school, whether it was youth or going on missions trips or whatever it was. But we've kind of always been on the same page and always seen life the same way, which has worked out really well for me.
And that's something that I don't think people sometimes realize about being a professional athlete is just the commitment and sacrifice by people around you where, you're gone half the year, you're moving at times. And I know you've spoke of that before, even just what that meant for your family and the complications.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Rachel had to sacrifice a lot. She was a nurse, went to school, got her degree, started nursing in Washington when I was there. But my career took me to so many different cities, it just wasn't possible to continue that. So she sacrificed her nursing career, and once we had kids, it was kind of her responsibility to help move these kids everywhere and sign them up for school and trek them around in all these different cities. And when I went over to Europe, we're in countries where English isn't the main language, and now we got to try to figure everything out, and all that kind of fell on her lap. And she was great about it and took great care of the family and took good care of me.
Wow. So now you're married, you have 3 kids. How is the experience of now you're on the other side of this hockey thing with your kids as a dad? How has that changed your life?
Oh, it's awesome. I just love watching them play hockey, or love watching my daughter play the piano, or whatever it is. It's just so much fun. It's just crazy how excited you can get for something so small. But it's great watching them grow up. And for me, just in the hockey world, thinking back, it was awesome having them around, because when you don't have kids, you have absolutely nothing to distract you. If you're in a slump, you just go home and you think about slumping the entire day, and it's hard to get off your mind. But when you get home, and I have 3 kids, they just tackle you and punch you in the face, and it's easy to think about other things. But
yeah.
The best thing is you come home, and whether you have a good game, scored 2 goals, come home, you're -2, it doesn't matter to the kids. They don't care. They give you a big hug, they love you the same, and that's the best part about having kids, is they just want you around.
Yeah, and I think you said that part of the decision in that retirement is just being there, which is so hard when you're playing and gone. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my daughter, it's crazy. She said, "Dad, can we go to a different city, a different team, so I can meet new people and go to a new school?" And I'm like, there are no kids in the world that say that. So I got blessed that they're very good at adapting and moving, and that's just what they're used to. They're just not used to living in one spot. So, being able to retire once I can officially announce that will be special to be able to spend lots of time with them.
Now, you started playing hockey at 4 years old. What was the first time you said, "Hey, I'm actually pretty good"?
I always thought it was pretty good. Yeah. Every kid you ask thinks they're a good player, and that's the beauty of being kids. You just don't know any better.
Yeah.
I would say the first time I really thought I was good was probably around 14, when I got drafted to the Brandon Wheat Kings. You're good locally, you're good in Winkler, you're good in Winnipeg. It's not that big of an area, but once you start talking about Western Canada or all of Canada, and you're still playing pretty well, that's when you realize that you're getting pretty good.
And when did you think, "Hey, I want to do this with my life. I want to be a professional athlete"?
I always wanted to be a professional athlete, and my parents probably thought I was crazy. I never thought of doing anything else ever.
Wow.
No other job. I always was going to be a professional hockey player, and that's just what I wanted to do.
And I remember you saying you'd actually convinced one of your buddies in kindergarten. I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, when I was in kindergarten, so my buddy Cam was actually the guy who got me into hockey, or that's what he'll tell you. So he's taking credit for my entire career. But we were in kindergarten. I just told him, "Hey, man, did you know I play for the Winnipeg Jets?" And he's like, "Really? Well, that's awesome." I convinced him. He believed me. I played for the Jets.
Yeah.
So when I got traded to the Jets a couple years later, he was the first guy I called, and I just said, "Hey, Cam, guess what? I play for the Winnipeg Jets."
You're just a little early in your yeah. So in your junior experience, you stayed here in Manitoba. You were a star for the Brandon Wheat Kings, and just to brag on your phone, but you, in your last year in the CHL, only Sidney Crosby in all of the 3 CHL leagues had more goals than you did. But what was your junior experience like?
Junior is the best. You don't really realize it while you're there until your pro career's done, and then you look back and like, man, junior was fun. Like you're with guys all the same age. They're all from different cities. You go to school for the first 2 years, but after that, you're just playing hockey. Like you have the best job in the world, and you're going on bus trips with these guys, playing cards, watching movies, just hanging out with your best buddies for 9 months of the year. Like really nothing beats that. And then it helps when you're scoring goals and winning games and all that good stuff. But that was a really good time.
And you've also said before in that season, you made an interesting connection with a ministry that really has had and continues to have an impact on your life.
Yeah, that was the first time I got to know Hockey Ministries. So for those of you that don't know, Hockey Ministries is kind of a little community that just takes care of junior players, professional players on different teams. Often there's chapel programs, kind of like a little Sunday school for the players, little church service, or just having a chaplain there that can check in when you're slumping or when things are going well or when you're missing home or anything like that. So that was kind of my first taste of Hockey Ministries.
And one other thing on your junior experience, I think you had said that like your dad only missed 4 games and sometimes they would like just sit with you and yeah.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to how my parents supported me, and I kind of forgot this, but they reminded me of this later. My first year didn't go well in junior. Like I was used to like really scoring a lot of goals growing up, and you get to junior, you're 16 playing against 20-year-old. I didn't play great to start, and my parents would come and watch the game, and they'd see how down I was, and they would stay after at my billet's house and just like stare at me because I wouldn't talk to them. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I'm so mad. And they'd just wait until I'd actually talk to them and open up. So that was something kind of looking back, like they were just always there for me.
Now, so you're as this is going on, and you talked about it, from junior you're drafted very highly. You're experiencing all this fame and success in your hockey career. In your internal world, you're a sincere follower of Jesus. How did that happen? How has that made an impact on your life?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to like Mike Waddell, my team chaplain, and Brandon. Like he kind of encouraged me. He said like hockey is something you do. It's not who you are. And that's something that's kind of always resonated with me. And I've tried to take that through my pro career. Like it doesn't really matter what I do, whether I score 50 goals, 100 goals, the worst player on my team. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't change your worth and value to God. That's something that I've tried to bring with me and just kind of focus on that. I'm more than just a hockey player.
Yeah, this is from a 2014 article where you're quoted in, and he said, I think the biggest thing faith has done for me as a professional athlete is put life in perspective. There's a lot more to life than hockey. Your worth is not decided by how good a hockey player you are or how people judge you as a hockey player. Talk to us about how that perspective has helped you amongst all the trappings that go along with pro sports, whether that's the temptations, the performance-enhancing drugs, anything like that just helped you. How's it helped you stay grounded?
I think that just helps me mostly through my injuries. knowing like when I had my back injury that potentially my career could be over. And it's a very stressful time, but then when you're thinking about it, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I still have this relationship with God. It's not going to change. Obviously, it would really suck, but that's just the reality of life. So that was something I just kept trying to remind myself through injuries, through trades, through a million different teams, just that my worth never changed.
Yeah. To take that even one step further, something like we obviously met in preparation for this, and something that you said that I don't know, I just kind of stopped when we were in the cafe and was just stunned. I wasn't sure how to take this, but you said that you actually were not happy with your career compared to the expectations you had for that.
Yeah, I feel like my personal and external expectations were extremely high. I felt like I was constantly chasing it and never really reaching it. I was used to scoring a ton of goals. For people that follow hockey, they'll probably know of the 2003 draft. That's when I got drafted, and if you look at the list, it's the who's who of hockey players. Everybody that was drafted in that year went on to play 1,000 games in the league, get 1,000 points, win multiple Stanley Cups, and I'm kind of tucked right in the middle there, just kind of blending in where I feel like maybe I don't quite fit in, and I'm constantly comparing myself to all these players that I outscored them in junior. I feel like I'm a better player than them in my head, and you just never really got there. So, that was something for me that was tough to comprehend. And I remember my wife constantly reminding me that comparison is the thief of all joy. So that was kind of something I had to keep reminding myself and keep thinking when I was playing that I still have it pretty good. I'm living my dream in the NHL.
Yeah.
So I should probably stop worrying about not having a point a game or not having a Hall of Fame career and just be happy where I am.
Yeah, and even tying that back to what your chaplain says, your worth is not based in Eric as a hockey player, but Eric as a person. And because I remember hearing you say that where you're disappointed, and I was like, okay, like, I was trying to make it at hockey, and my coach didn't really care if I showed up on games or practices, and much less scouts. And I kind of heard you say that. It's like, hey, what hope is there for the rest of us, But I think that's just, it illustrates so well what your chaplain said, the need for the gospel, that, only in Christianity is our identity given to us and it's received based on what someone else has done, what Christ has done. And I think, if I'm hearing you right, really what you're saying is, even if you had Gordie Howe numbers, you've lived what a lot of us have tried to live. Even if you had like those kind of numbers, you'd say the cupboard would still be bare if that's what you're basing, our identity on.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like as a competitive athlete, you always want more. And it doesn't really matter what you get to. You always think you can do more. You can always do better. But there's a time when you just got to kind of just let that all go and just realize that there's things that are more important. And that's something that I've always just tried to focus on.
Talk to us about, just as you're going through this, you're going through junior, you're going through so many different teams. What were the positive influences on you spiritually?
Well, the easy answer there would just be friends and family and my wife, obviously. It was great for me to always come back to Winkler, come back to Winnipeg, just to see my friends and just get back to the normal. That was awesome for me. But for me personally, I always really just enjoyed going to Hockey Ministries hockey camp. So when I was in junior, I started going. I went to Edmonton or went to Minnesota to work with these kids. And you work with them for a week long, and you're trying to teach them how to play hockey or just some simple things. But you're there for them, but then you end up leaving, and you're just completely uplifted and feeling great. And I found that week was kind of a way for me to recalibrate myself, to what was important, to what was really of value to me. And that was just a nice way to start every season. It was kind of just before I would leave for training camp, and just kind of puts life into perspective a little bit.
And I think something that maybe we don't realize, or like if you're not a hockey player, you don't realize, but like there's something about the hockey culture that is just, it's different than other sports where, like, sometimes after an NFL game, you'll see players gathering for prayer, even from opposite teams. But you seem to talk to us about just how you navigated that in a culture that, hockey culture seems to almost be against some of the things we hold as Christians.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to talk about your faith, especially in the hockey world where oftentimes hockey players that are Christians would be seen as soft, or you don't want to play hard, you don't want to play physical, you don't want to fight, which obviously isn't the case. There's a lot of Christian hockey players that can do both. I never really fought, but I didn't shy away from the physical game. But I feel like Hockey Ministries was kind of my in. I didn't want to go around the room preaching and just sharing God's word just in the middle of the dressing room, but I kind of had the in where, hey guys, we have chapel. We're going to have chapel this week. Do you guys want to come? Do you want to join? We're going to talk, just have a little Bible study. We're going to have lunch or whatever it is. It was just kind of an easy way for me to kind of tell them what I was all about and just kind of open the door for my teammates. And
I think a lot of people wouldn't know this, but you actually initiated the chapel program with the Winnipeg Jets, with the Washington Capitals, or at least restarted it there. And talk to us about that.
Yeah, that was something I always took pride in. It was important for me to have chapel programs wherever I was, just because you're busy and it's very easy to get twisted and turned and away from your faith and just what you believe in. It's just great to have the chaplains there. They can just text you, call you. You can kind of have your church service with them. You're playing every Saturday, every Sunday. You don't have time, or you're tired, or whatever. That's your church in season.
Now, over the course of your long career, you won the Calder Cup, you won the Spangler Cup. In 2016, you were a Stanley Cup champion with Pittsburgh Penguins. Tell us about, what were those high moments like?
Oh, winning is the best, I can tell you that. So the Calder Cup is my first year pro. You can't really appreciate it I did lose in the finals in juniors with the Brandon Wheat Kings, so like that one stung. So you kind of understand like how close we were. And you won that first year in pro, and you think, yeah, we're just going to do this all the time. But it doesn't really work that way. So that one you don't really appreciate. The Spangler Cup, it's kind of like a one-week tournament where Team Canada gets to stack a team, so you know you have a really good chance to win. So that one, it's still awesome to win, but it's not something you've really fought for your whole life. But the Stanley Cup was something I always wanted to win. I had a poster of the Stanley Cup on my wall growing up, and like this was the reason I played hockey. So to be able to win that after, I don't even know, maybe like 10, 11, 12 years. Like I was in the league a long time before I won the Stanley Cup, and I didn't think I was ever going to win it. So to win that was kind of made all the injuries worthwhile, all the trades, all the everything worthwhile. It was an unbelievable feeling.
And it's interesting that, as you mentioned, injuries, because as you look back over your career and all these years and accomplishments, it wasn't always a straight line to get there. There were some bumps along the way. And you told me earlier that a theme of your career was constantly having to overcome possibly career-ending injuries. Some injuries were a herniated disc in 2008, where you missed almost the entire year after undergoing back surgery. And you thought maybe at 2021 your career was maybe over. You had a broken hand. You remember your time in Winnipeg where you had an undisclosed upper body injury, which a shoulder injury. But how did you process these times? That must have been unbelievably hard for you.
Yeah, it was extremely difficult, especially the first one, because my career was kind of just trending in the right direction. I had an unbelievable junior career. In the minor leagues, I was playing really well. We had won our title. I was a key player in the team, and kind of getting into the NHL, just breaking in. I played maybe 30, 40 games, and I had this back injury that was just inhibiting my play, and I just kept playing through it because I finally made it. Like, I don't want to shut down. So I kept playing through this back injury, and it was just worse and worse and worse, and got to the point where I could barely even tie my skates. And I remember one game at the Bell Center in Montreal, which, by the way, is one of the best rinks ever to play in. Like, the atmosphere is unbelievable. So I'm just sitting there on the ice, kind of looking around the 21,000 fans, and I'm lining up for a face-off, and the centerman gets kicked out, and I have to go in, and I couldn't bend down to take the face-off. My back was so bad, and I lost the face-off, and I remember thinking after that game, like I can't do this anymore. Like, I can barely move, I can barely walk, and I'm trying to play at the highest level in the world. So this was kind of before trainers really were soft on you and pulled you out of the game. You'd have to pull yourself, which is almost impossible to do for an athlete. So I had to tell the coach and training staff that I wasn't able to play anymore. And from that time, for the next year, I was trying to figure out why my back hurt, seeing different specialists and traveling all over North America, and that was a really tough time. And
I remember you saying too that you one time you had needed both surgeries, both shoulders needed surgery at the same time, and
yeah, so after one season, I was playing in Washington. Both my shoulders had dislocated numerous times. And I went to see a doctor, and he said, okay, well, we're going to have to repair both your shoulders. I said, okay. And he's like, we're going to do them 6 weeks apart because you can't do them at the same time. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other like, well, why can't we do them at the same time? And he's like, well, just for recovery reasons. And then he's like, but you're going to have to miss the start of next season. I said, well, I can't miss the start of next season because that's just the way hockey players think. Yeah. So we told the doctor we want to do them both on the same day, and he said, let me think about it. And he called us back and said, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. So my wife, being the giving woman that she is, with her nursing degree in tow.
That's a lot of faith in your wife, man. That's
Yeah, she took care of me for a little while as I was sitting in my slings like this, helped me nurse back to health and get ready for the next season.
Now, one of the things that I think has been so impressive about your story as a Christian is that you attend church. You attend church regularly. You go with your family, and that's been hard to do. Is like, in some ways, it's maybe a lot of us have had a similar experience during COVID. Things shut down, and you were having to find new places everywhere you got traded. Talk to us about just the importance of that and some of your strategy behind that.
Yeah, I'd like to say I found one everywhere I went, but that's just not true. It's difficult, especially once you have your family and. Like I said, playing on Saturdays and Sundays, but we try to go to church as often as we could. We'd heavily rely on hockey ministries to run a chapel program or take care of us, but I grew to really enjoy listening to music, and whether it's a plane ride or my truck or listening to a podcast or whatever it may be, you realize that you can really worship anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a church. It doesn't have to be on Sunday morning. It can be at any point in time. And like I told you backstage, I was watching your services in Russia when I was over there. You were getting the morning started, and I was watching it just before bed. So it was kind of cool.
But I appreciate that, just the effort to say, hey, I'm going to tune in. I'm half a world away, and for you, I think it was 8 or 9 or 10 p.m. You're saying you're watching, and so just that investment into your faith and way to go. At some point, you decided to get very serious about sharing your faith, and you're just a guy that you thank God had a lot of opportunities and every opportunity. A lot of guys who've done what you've done wouldn't be here with us, and so you're very serious about this. Talk about how you just look at that.
Yeah, I feel like I was given the gift of hockey to share my faith with my teammates and players along the way. It's not really a sport that talks about faith very often, and like we said, it's difficult to talk about it in the hockey dressing room. But for me, whichever way it was, I just wanted to show up every day with a smile on my face and just kind of be a positive light for teammates, whether I was in a slump or not scoring or having a great day. I just tried to show up with the same attitude every day and just try to show them that there's another life and there's a reason to live other than playing hockey. So that's kind of what I always wanted to do. And
I think you even used the Stanley Cup in those attempts too, you were telling me.
Yeah, so the hockey ministries thing, obviously with all these schools that I've went to, I feel like hockey ministries has kind of just followed me along, everywhere I've been. And when we won the Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh, it just so happened that hockey ministries had a camp in Pittsburgh. So 2 days after I won the Stanley Cup, I went to celebrate with the kids at hockey ministries camp in Pittsburgh. And then we got back to Winnipeg, and you never know when your Stanley Cup day is going to be. They don't really give you a lot of notice. So I got a call like, hey, in 2 weeks we're going to get the Stanley Cup to you in Winnipeg. And I was like, great. And I looked it up, and Hockey Ministries Camp was running in Winnipeg. Wow. And I was able to bring the Stanley Cup there and share that with the kids. They had a fire alarm in the morning at 7 a.m. to wake them up. And then bring them out, and we took pictures of the Stanley Cup and everything. Cool. Yeah. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah. And one of the things you've done using this influence you have, you actually wrote a children's book. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I wrote a book called The Bulliest Dozer a number of years back. As an athlete, you're kind of always reading to schools, you're always talking to kids, and I just thought it'd be great to talk about the topic of bullying for one, and two, to be able to read a book that you've written. So I thought that would be really cool. So we wrote a book about anti-bullying, just kind of teaching kids the golden rule. And it's not really a Christian-based book, it's just a book about bullying, but the big rule in there is basically just treat others the way you want to be treated, which is a pretty easy philosophy and maybe a philosophy some kids don't understand. So to be able to go into school and talk to them about that is always special. And
you wrote that quite a while. We hear about bullying a lot now, but that was actually, you're really ahead of the curve with that.
Yeah, that was before social media, Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff was around. So I don't want to age myself too much. I think it was right when cell phones were coming out. I don't even know. But no, that was a thing I could kind of see developing a little bit, but it probably wasn't big until a couple years later, but it was definitely a lot of fun creating that book and just sharing it with the kids.
Eric, a lot of the Oasis family maybe invited guests today, and maybe they're just not sure about where they stand spiritually, or maybe haven't given much thought at all to God at work in their life. Here's your chance to shoot straight with us. What would you say? What would be your advice?
Well, in the hockey world, we always use the term trust in the process, and that's something where the coach tells you something, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to play these systems, and if you do, you're going to be successful, you're going to win. So you do that, you lose a lot of games, you just have to trust in this process, but the problem is that coaches don't always know everything, and they're not always right, and you don't always win. But I try to bring that motto into my Christian life with God. Trust in the process. He's always got a plan for you. Whether you understand it or you don't, he never says it's going to be easy. Looking at my career, it was never easy. I never really had that year like, oh, this is going to be a good year. I felt like I was always kind of hard year after hard year, and you just have to trust in the process and believe that God has a plan for you and just kind of go with it.
And I remember one specific way you lived that out. You told me a story about one day playing in Chicago.
Yeah, so yeah, trusting in the process and not always believing the coaches and stuff. Talk about that. So I was in Chicago, we were at the hotel, and I was supposed to be traded from Pittsburgh for the last week. So I spent about a week of not sleeping, just waiting to find out where I was going to get traded to, where I was going to have to move my family to. So it was about an hour before the trade deadline. We played that night in Chicago, and I went for a pregame meal. And I see the GM there, and I go talk to him, and I was like, "Hey, like, what's going on? Like, do you know where I'm going?" He's like, "Hey, Eric, like, you're not going anywhere. Like, just go get some sleep." I was like, "Oh, sweet! Like, this is awesome. I'm gonna go get a good nap. I'm gonna have a great game today." So I go to bed. I fall asleep in about 2 seconds, and then my phone rings, and he says, "You're traded." So I call my wife, and we're on the move again, and she's just stuck with everything. So she's stuck figuring out the real world problems, and I hop on a plane and go to LA, and we played the Kings later on, but that's just how you just never know what's going to happen, and you can't really trust anything in the hockey world.
And I know some of us don't realize some of the implications of this, but I remember in talking to Rachel about that, she had said that, like, you owned a house in Pittsburgh. You've never to this day set foot back in that house because she had to pack, and just the tough
I left for the
aspects
road
of that.
trip, and I got traded. I never went back. And she is stuck with moving the house or getting the movers or whatever it is. But that's just part of the hockey world that people don't realize, and how you really can't do anything on your own, and you need a lot of help along the way.
And the Lord is there just every step of the way, every detail. And I know you didn't mention this at some of the hard times when you said one time you were out of the league, you had to go to Finland and work your way back in. And same idea, just trusting.
Yeah, I mean, my career, talking back about that back injury, that's kind of when Rachel and I decided, like, obviously this is happening for a reason, and we kind of figured it was because, God was showing us that He was in control. That, like, this was Him that put me in this position and gave me this ability. So, we just kind of at that point handed off, said, like, this is you. Put us where you want to put us. We'll go where you want us to go. And from a guy that was traded numerous times, often on one-year contracts, looking back, we never worried about our next contract. We never worried about where we were going to play next. We never lost any sleep about it because we knew that God was going to take care of us. And whether that was being out of the league or after my season in Winnipeg, I went to Finland, had to perform well again to get back into the NHL. And that happened a couple times where I was out and never really worried about it. It was just, whatever happened.
Well, I want to thank you for that. And just for all of us, there's a learning there with whatever it is we're worried about, whatever it is going on in our life. Sometimes spiritual breakthrough is just one step away. And I think your stories encourage us to trust in God with that. And so if I can encourage you wherever you're at, take that next step. Keep going. And I think your story, Eric, testifies to us about God at work in every detail, every day of our lives.